want to learn from you guys about what we can do to keep our kids safe, to keep our police officers, men and women, safe, and to keep our caregivers who are providing that service to autism safe. So, Carolyn, let's start with you, and talk a little bit about, for people who haven't seen the blog yet, about some of the resources that are packed into this blog. You just were telling me a second ago, and I said, hold on to that. Like, let's tell them when we get live on the show. So talk to us a little bit.
I just wanted to say thank you for doing this show, because it's very important that parents be prepared for these types of situations and not wait for something to happen, and follow up after the fact, because we already know that wandering is a big issue within the autism community, and a lot of times when these types of incidents happen, it's when our loved ones are in the community and may have wandered or eloped. And my husband and I, we actually are parents of a 25-year-old young man with autism, and we have been through some situations with our son, even though we both have a background within law enforcement, that have made us aware that parents do have to be prepared in these types of situations. So what we did 16 years ago actually was start an organization called Lean on Us, and we started training those within the first responder profession, and also within the judicial sector, social workers, emergency medical technicians, firemen, anyone that would respond within an emergency situation or be involved within the criminal justice system, judicial sector, or within social work, or even people like sexual abuse counselors, because victimization of individuals with disabilities is also something that we need to think about in the back of our minds as parents. So what we started to do also was to approach our federal government agencies, and we spoke with the Department of Justice on this issue, and they asked us to do a project with the Autism Society of America. And the first project that we did was serving victims of crime with autism with them, and we developed 6 fact sheets for professionals and also a training curriculum specific to autism. So that was one of the first resources developed in 2006 and 2007 in this country, specific to victims of crime with autism. And within that training that we developed, there is training for first responders on responding appropriately to individuals with autism. So since that time, we've been approaching different agencies, working with different autism advocacy organizations like the National Autism Association, TACA, the Autism Society of Michigan first started, and then the Autism Society of America. The Autism Society of America has a program called Safe and Sound, and a lot of people know also that the National Autism Association has many, many, many resources on wandering, and they have a big red safety box that families can order to assist them in being prepared for wandering and eloping incidents. So those are just a couple of the things. Also, my husband and I are advisors on a committee for the National Center on Criminal Justice and Disability. That is an organization that was started through a Department of Justice grant as well, and that is through the ARC of America. So they have a lot of resources on their website also on autism specifically.
And what is that? What is that website?
It's through the ARC of America. If you just go to www.arc.org, and then the National Center, you can do a /NCCDJ, and you'll pull up the National Center on Criminal Justice and Disability. Those are just a couple of the things we've done. We've also done some extensive training in our home state of Michigan, where we worked on a criminal justice grant through our Michigan Community Health Department, where we trained trainers for law enforcement and trained over 10,000 officers in that program. I also wrote the curriculum for that program. So there is training out there, and there is good training out there and good resources available.
And I want
But
to
one of the
interrupt you for
things,
one
yeah, go
second,
ahead.
though, Carolyn, and say I'm sure that there are people who are listening and they're going, yeah, but they have done all this training and these things still happen. And I want to put it firmly back in individual people's courts because you've taken responsibility in your area and further out of your area to make sure that first responders are being trained, and you've given materials so that other people can do that. But we don't know how many incidents didn't happen because of the work that you've done. But we know that if each family took it upon themselves and said, I'm going to make sure that my child is as safe as possible, and I'm going to make sure that my area police get this training. I'm going to be the person who is, the buck stops with me. I'm going to make sure that the police in my area are trained. We would be looking at a different situation. So I want to say to people, if you're listening and you're like, okay, then why are these things still happening? It's because enough people haven't done what Carolyn and Andrew have done. And you can be that person in your community and make sure that you're keeping your child safe and that your local first responders are getting that training. And we're going to give you some resources, and the resources are in the blog. You can go to takablognow.org. And read the blog. And what Lisa does is amazing because she gives you clickable links to everything that is talked about so that you can get those resources to do that in your area. Exactly the same things that Carolyn is talking about that she and her husband put together to train those police. I just wanted to put that out there, Carolyn. Now, what were you about to say?
I was about to say that currently there's the Kevin and Avante's law that the Senate passed unanimously recently. I think it was a couple weeks ago. That right now is going to be going to the House for a vote. So I think the first thing that parents right now should do and advocate for people with disability, not just autism, is to actually call your House rep right now and say this law or this act is up for approval before the House for a vote. And that's something that you can do is call and say, we support Kevin's and Avante's law, which would also bring more additional resources for appropriations for law enforcement training, but also appropriations to have locating devices provided to families across the country. So that's something that it doesn't take you anything more than 5 minutes to call your House representative on a federal level. They're supposed to be working for us. So call them, express your concerns, tell them that you support this. This law has been on the table for 2 years. It should not have taken that long for us to get this passed because the Department of Justice has the funds sitting there waiting and available, and this is going to appropriate at least $15 million to move this forward. And if these incidents keep happening, especially with the epidemic rates of autism in this country, we are going to have more people getting hurt, and that's not acceptable for any disability. And we really need to look at, when we train on autism, we also need to look at things like epilepsy, because there's kids for seizure disorders, mental health, a lot of different things, not just autism. So it's very important to also look at the other side of the coin and what first responders are trying to do for our kids and our loved ones in the community and also our families to assist. The article that we wrote that's connected to Lisa's blog will give families free tips on how to get active within your community, how to approach your local jurisdictions, how to speak with your police chiefs, your local sheriffs, how to apply for appropriations and funding when the Kevin's and Avante's law does pass. These are the things that it costs us nothing really to do, and that we should be active members and do this to protect not only our children but other families of children, other families and kids with autism, because we don't know when these things can happen. The incident in Miami is a perfect example of that. Here we have a care provider who's a trained behavioral therapist trying to assist a man with autism, and he's the one that is caught within the situation.
Yeah.
And something like this should not happen. I'm going to have you talk to my husband if there's any specific things that you would like to ask him regarding response situations.
Yes, and I want to thank you so much for being with us, both of you. And Andrew, welcome to Autism Live. I gotta say, even in our last interview we were doing, we had two individuals that we were talking to that are adults who are on the autism spectrum, and we were giving a tease to the fact that we were going to be talking to you guys on the phone, and they both were saying, "Oh my gosh, this is so important that you're talking about this," and they were thrilled to know that we were having a police officer with us. I think, first of all, I want to start. I want to not be emotional, but I want to thank you for the work that you do. This has been such a hard time for our men and women in blue, with so many things going on. And I can't even begin to imagine what it is like to have your job on a daily basis, but especially in the last month here in the United States, it's a tougher job. So thank you for being willing to talk to us, and thank you for the job that you're doing. Is there anything that you can tell us as autism parents to help us to have an understanding of how we cannot be afraid for our kids and our caregivers today?
Well, it, like I always say, I mean, it's a two-way street where
Yeah.
we do train law enforcement on how to properly respond to people with autism, but we also do a piece for families and individuals with autism on what to expect if they do have an encounter with the police and how to respond to what they're coming in contact with. So it's definitely important that both sides know what is going on, and the fear of the unknown is what causes a lot of problems where, the police officers may even have fear if they've never had contact with a person with individual with autism.
Yeah.
And it could heighten their defense level up. And but we always try to make sure that people get are active with their local law enforcement and first responders, the firefighters, and go to the open houses or try to coordinate something where you can have an autism group interact with first responders so that they have a little bit of experience and knowledge of what they're going to see if they do have a contact with a police officer or firefighters.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We had one of the, years ago, it was like Thomas the Tank Engine movie. That's how long ago it was. We had a special screening, and then we coordinated with local police and fire to have all their apparatus out in the parking lot afterwards. And after the movie, the kids all came out, and they got to interact with police and fire and ambulance. They got to sit in an ambulance, try on some of the fire equipment. But they were able to, the first experience a child has, especially with autism, of an ambulance should not be in an emergency situation. They should have a little bit, they should be able to have the opportunity to see what's inside an ambulance, and that way they're not as scared or it's not as terrifying to them.
Even as you're talking, I'm thinking about when my son was little. We very actively tried to make sure that we went to events where there were first responders, and we did the thing about sitting in the police car and getting on the fire truck and being in the ambulance, and it's really socially acceptable when it's little kids. But I'm realizing I have a teenager now, and watching that video of the 27-year-old with autism in the parking lot, I'm realizing that I certainly haven't been good, and I don't see events for older kids, and that maybe that's something that we should all be very aware of. That it's something we all do when they're little, or we try to, but keeping that up, because I think it changes a little bit when they become teenagers, because suddenly I would imagine, my son is taller than I am, and I'm a tall woman. My son doesn't yet understand that he can be physically intimidating, that he could be perceived as a threat to someone, and that I'm just, as we're talking, realizing I need to get him back over to the police department for him to meet them now.
Right? There's always a turnover in police, and they're wondering. They do want to know who's in their community, and it helps them do their job better too, and it makes for a safer environment.
And And thank you so much. I imagine that being on the police force yourself, that you have a greater understanding of the stress that goes with the life of being a police officer, and that you can give unique insights when you're training the police, about what to look for because you have a son who's on the spectrum. But the other piece of it is understanding all the assumptions that the police will make when they see someone running away. um, their first thought isn't going to be, oh, that's a young person on the autism spectrum who does not understand. I
Right.
mean, we just all have to accept that and understand that that's a reality. That you're thrown into situations over and over and over again in which you have to protect the lives of the people around and your own life, and that is not going to be your first assumption. How do you get police officers, though, to have it be a part of their awareness, and what clues do you tell them to look for, Andrew?
Um, Obviously, you tell them to look for the the normal signs of autism, where the repetitive behavior, the head bobbing, the rocking. I'm sorry, the different types of stims, and
I imagine the eye contact is a really hard one because when you're in a position of authority and trying to make contact with somebody and get control of a situation, you're probably really hoping for eye contact, and that eye contact is something that a lack of eye contact may suggest a guilt, right?
yeah, definitely. There's always suspicion, I should say.
Yeah,
That guilt, this definitely causes a heightened suspicion of the person's motives
yeah,
if they're afraid to make eye contact,
yeah,
and that's obviously one of the characteristics.
yeah,
But like I said, we have multiple. I mean, we have trainings for all types of disabilities too, and it's important to realize that police officers are not going to be able to diagnose these types of things,
right.
but they are going to be able to identify a little bit better that it may be a medical situation or a different situation where you're responding to somebody with autism or another disability, as opposed to just the suspicious suspect.
Right. Well, I want to just go back and say that the information, a pipeline to get to the information. If you go to TACA now blog.org, you're going to find the blog there, and you can. All the links are clickable. Lisa's very good at giving you information. It's not the Skills for Autism. It's tacanowblog.org. And if you click on that, you'll be able to get the information that we've just been talking about with Carolyn and with Andrew. And if people, it's a two-pronged thing, and we all need to take responsibility. You got to take responsibility for making sure that your child gets exposure to those first responders and knows how to appropriately respond. And for those of you who are sitting there and thinking, well, but my child is more severe, work with a behaviorist who can help you to get your child to understand, because these are things that can be taught. I can't think of a single individual that can't learn to do some of the very basic things that we need for them to be able to do for safety. And a good behaviorist will be able to figure that out for you. But then you've also got to take responsibility for making sure that your local law enforcement has the resources that Carolyn and Andrew have put together. Take that upon yourself. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. So again, we want to say go to www.tacanowblog.org, and you'll be able to find all of that information. Carolyn and Andrew, I thank you so much. I know you guys are in a car and you're headed off to do good work. And I thank you for taking the time to be with us via the phone.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much for doing the program. It was excellent.
And thank you both for all the work that you're doing and being such a resource for all of us. We really appreciate it.